The stagecoach wheels kicked up dust as it rumbled to a stop in front of the dilapidated station, and Rosalie Taylor stepped down, her silk dress already stained with the grime of a 3-day journey from Boston to the untamed Colorado territory. The year was 1876, and with every mile westward, she had felt the suffocating weight of scandal and shame slowly giving way to a terrifying uncertainty about what awaited her in Delta, Colorado, a place so far removed from the society parlors she'd known that it might as well have been another world entirely. "Last stop for Delta, miss," the driver called down, already tossing her trunk to the ground with little ceremony. "Someone's supposed to be meeting you." Rosalie clutched her reticule tighter, the letter from her distant Aunt Martha crumpled inside. "I believe so," she answered, though she had no real confidence in the statement. Her family had arranged everything with such haste after the scandal broke that she scarcely had time to comprehend that she was being sent away, possibly forever. The dusty main street of Delta stretched before her, a far cry from the cobblestone avenues of Boston. A handful of wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, and what appeared to be a small hotel made up the entirety of the town's business district. Men in worn clothing and dust-covered boots ambled along the boardwalks, turning to stare at the newcomer in her fine Eastern dress. After 15 minutes of waiting with no sign of her aunt, Rosalie gathered her courage and dragged her trunk toward the hotel. She had barely made it 10 feet when the weight of it nearly pulled her arm from its socket. "Madam, you look like you could use some help with that." The voice came from behind her, deep and warm as summer honey. Rosalie turned to find herself looking up at a tall man with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a clear sky. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, a simple button-up shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing strong forearms, denims, and boots that had seen their fair share of miles. "I'm quite capable, thank you," she replied automatically, the defensive posture of a woman who had learned the hard way that men's offers rarely came without expectations. He tipped his hat back, revealing sandy hair that curled slightly at the edges. "No doubt about that. But seeing as you're new in town and that trunk looks like it weighs more than a young heifer, I figured I might spare you the trouble of dragging it through our fine Delta mud." Despite herself, Rosalie felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "And you are Ethan Wilder, madam." He extended a calloused hand. "I run the ranch just outside of town, and you'd be—" "Rosalie Taylor," she replied, cautiously taking his hand for the briefest of moments. "I'm visiting my Aunt Martha Collins, though it seems she's forgotten I was arriving today." Recognition dawned in Ethan's eyes. Martha Collins lives in the White House with the blue shutters about a mile up the creek. When Rosalie nodded, his expression grew troubled. "Miss Taylor, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but your Aunt Martha passed on about 3 weeks ago." Influenza took her quick. The world seemed to tilt beneath Rosalie's feet, her last tenuous connection to this place gone. The scandal in Boston had been bad enough, but at least she had thought she was being sent somewhere to someone. Now she truly had nowhere to go. "I see," she managed, her voice impressively steady despite the panic rising in her chest. "Well then, I suppose I shall need to secure a room at the hotel until I determine my next course of action." Ethan studied her face with a gaze that seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. "That'd be fine if we had a proper hotel. What we've got is more of a saloon with rooms upstairs, and it's no place for a lady traveling alone." "I haven't many options, Mr. Wilder," Rosalie said stiffly. He looked at her thoughtfully, then at her trunk, then back to her face. "Your family in Boston, they know about your aunt." "I doubt it. The arrangements were made rather hastily." She wasn't about to explain how her family had practically disowned her, after she'd been caught in a compromising position with her father's married business partner, a man who had pursued her relentlessly, then claimed she had seduced him when they were discovered. That her reputation was in tatters, her engagement broken, and her future prospects destroyed in a single night. "I see," Ethan said, though she doubted he truly did. "Well, Miss Taylor, I've got a proposition for you. My ranch housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, has been pestering me to hire a governess for my niece. The child lost her parents, my brother and his wife, last year, and she's living with me now. 9 years old and wild as a Mustang, with no one to teach her proper manners or her letters." Rosalie blinked in surprise. "You're offering me employment, if you're qualified. Can you read, write, and figure?" "I attended the Winthrop Academy for Young Ladies in Boston," she replied, a hint of pride creeping into her voice. "I'm well versed in literature, mathematics, French, and music." A smile spread across Ethan's face, transforming his rugged features into something quite striking. "Well then, sounds like you're overqualified, which suits me just fine. The position includes room and board at the ranch, a small salary, and Sundays off. It's respectable work, Miss Taylor, and it would give you time to determine your next course of action, as you put it." Rosalie considered her options. She had a modest sum of money sewn into the lining of her dress, enough perhaps for a train ticket back east, but what awaited her there? Certainly not a welcome from her family, who had made it abundantly clear she was no longer their concern, and a single woman with a tarnished reputation had few honest ways to support herself. "What of your niece's mother?" she asked. "Would she not object to a stranger caring for her child?" A shadow passed over Ethan's face. "Like I said, my brother and his wife passed last year. Typhoid. Emma's been with me since." "I'm sorry for your loss," Rosalie said softly, genuinely moved by the pain she saw briefly in his eyes. "Thank you." He cleared his throat. "So, what do you say? At least come out to the ranch and meet Emma before you decide. If it's not suitable, I'll bring you back to town myself." Against her better judgment, but with few alternatives, Rosalie found herself nodding. "Very well, Mr. Wilder. I accept your offer to visit the ranch and meet your niece. After that, I shall decide." "Fair enough." He picked up her trunk with an ease that made her previous struggle seem ridiculous. "My wagon's over by the general store. We can stop in there first if you need any supplies." As they walked, Rosalie became acutely aware of the stares from the townspeople. A woman in her fine city clothes walking alongside Ethan Wilder was clearly the subject of interest, and she suspected immediate gossip. "The people here seem quite curious," she observed quietly. Ethan chuckled. "Small town. Not much happens in Delta that doesn't become everyone's business by sundown. Don't worry about it. They're good folks, mostly." At the general store, Ethan greeted the proprietor with easy familiarity. "Afternoon, George. This is Miss Taylor. She's considering taking on the governess position for Emma." The balding shopkeeper smiled warmly. "That's so. Well, pleased to meet you, Miss Taylor. That little girl could use a steady hand. Got her father's spirit, that one. Thank you, mister. Just George is fine, miss." "Everyone calls me that. You need anything from the store?" Rosalie glanced around at the provisions lining the shelves. She had packed in such a hurry that she hadn't considered many practical items. "Perhaps a few toiletries if you have them. Third shelf on the right," George directed. "Got some nice lavender soap in last week. Popular with the ladies." As Rosalie selected a few modest items, she overheard Ethan speaking quietly with George. "Any word about those cattle rustlers hitting the Henderson place?" Ethan asked. George's voice dropped. "Sheriff thinks they've moved on toward Utah territory, but can't be sure. You keeping your men on night watch?" "Every night since we heard. Can't afford to lose any of this year's calves." Rosalie pretended not to have heard as she brought her selections to the counter. The reality of frontier life with its dangers and hardships was beginning to sink in. What had she gotten herself into? The ride to the Wilder ranch was bumpy but mercifully short, just under 5 miles outside of town. As they crested a small rise, Rosalie gasped involuntarily at the sight that greeted her. A sprawling valley opened up before them, with a sturdy 2-story house nestled against a backdrop of cottonwood trees. A creek meandered through the property, and beyond it, cattle grazed on lush grass that swayed in the afternoon breeze. "It's beautiful," she admitted, surprised by how much she meant it. Ethan's face softened with pride. "My father claimed this land when I was just a boy. Started with nothing but a 1-room cabin and 10 head of cattle. Built it up over the years. He passed on 5 years back, but he lived to see it become something worthwhile." As they approached the house, a small figure came tearing out the front door, golden hair flying behind her like a banner. "Uncle Ethan, you're back." The girl skidded to a halt when she saw Rosalie. "Who's that?" "Emma, mind your manners," Ethan chided gently. "This is Miss Taylor. She might be your new teacher if you can convince her you're not completely uncivilized." Emma looked Rosalie up and down with frank curiosity. "You talk funny. Are you from back east? Do you know how to ride a horse? Can you shoot a gun?" "Emma." Ethan looked mortified, but Rosalie surprised herself by laughing. "Yes, I'm from Boston. No, I don't know how to ride, at least not well. And I have never handled a firearm in my life." She held out her hand to the girl. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Emma." The child took her hand and shook it firmly. "You're pretty. Are you going to marry Uncle Ethan?" This time it was Rosalie's turn to be flustered. "Certainly not. I've only just met your uncle. He's offered me a position as your governess." "What's a governess?" Emma asked. "Someone who will teach you reading, writing, arithmetic, and proper manners," Ethan explained, his ears slightly pink from Emma's earlier question. Emma considered this. "Will you make me wear shoes all the time?" Rosalie glanced down at the girl's bare feet and bit back a smile. "Perhaps not all the time." This seemed to satisfy Emma. "Okay, you can stay." "That's not entirely your decision," Ethan reminded his niece. "And Miss Taylor hasn't agreed to take the position yet. Now go tell Mrs. Abernathy we have a guest for supper." As Emma dashed off, Ethan turned to Rosalie with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry about that. She's direct." "She's delightful," Rosalie replied honestly. "And clearly very much at home here." Ethan helped Rosalie down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a brief moment, she was acutely aware of his proximity, of the scent of leather and something uniquely masculine that clung to him. She stepped away quickly, smoothing her skirts. "Let me show you the house," he offered, leading the way. The Wilder ranch house was larger than it appeared from a distance, 6 bedrooms upstairs. A spacious kitchen, dining room and sitting room on the main floor, and a small study that Ethan explained would serve as the schoolroom. It was plainly but comfortably furnished, with large windows that let in the afternoon sunlight. "Mrs. Abernathy keeps everything running smoothly," Ethan explained as they entered the kitchen where a plump, gray-haired woman was kneading bread dough. "Best cook in 3 counties, too." The housekeeper looked up, flour dusting her capable hands. "So this is the young lady Emma's already talking my ear off about." She wiped her hands on her apron and came forward. "Clara Abernathy, miss. Pleasure to meet you." "Rosalie Taylor. The pleasure is mine, Mrs. Abernathy." "Call me Clara, dear. Everyone does." She turned to Ethan. "I've put fresh linens in the blue bedroom for Miss Taylor. Supper will be ready at 6 sharp." "Thank you, Clara," Ethan nodded. "I'll show Miss Taylor upstairs so she can freshen up." The blue bedroom, as it turned out, was a charming space with a four-poster bed, a small dresser, and a washstand. A handmade quilt in shades of blue and cream covered the bed, and simple white curtains framed a window that looked out over the valley. "It's lovely," Rosalie said, genuinely surprised by the comfort of the accommodations. "My mother decorated this room," Ethan explained. "She always wanted daughters but got stuck with two sons instead. This was her guest room for the ladies who visited. Your mother had good taste, she did." He set her trunk down at the foot of the bed. "I'll leave you to settle in. Supper's at 6, like Clara said. We can discuss the particulars of the position after Emma's gone to bed if that suits you." Rosalie nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Wilder." "Ethan," he corrected. "If you're going to be living under my roof, there's no need for such formality." After he left, Rosalie sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly overwhelmed by the events of the day. This morning, she had arrived in a strange town, expecting to live with an aunt she barely remembered. Now she was considering a position as governess in the home of a man she had just met. What would her parents think if they could see her now? The thought brought a bitter smile to her lips. They had made their feelings quite clear when they put her on that stagecoach. "You've brought shame to this family," her father had said, his voice cold with disappointment. "We've arranged for you to stay with your mother's aunt in Colorado. Perhaps in time the scandal will fade, but you are not to return until we send for you." Her mother had been even more cutting. "No decent man will have you now. Your sister's prospects could be ruined by association. It's better for everyone if you're not here." Rosalie wiped away a tear that had escaped despite her resolve not to cry anymore. She had cried enough on the journey west. Now she needed to be practical. This opportunity with the Wilders, unexpected as it was, might be her salvation. Teaching a child, living in this beautiful place, it was far better than she had dared hope for when she stepped off that stagecoach. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Miss Taylor." Emma's voice called. "Mrs. Abernathy says you should come down for lemonade before supper." "Thank you, Emma. I'll be right there." Rosalie quickly washed her face and hands in the basin, smoothed her hair, and joined the household downstairs. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of activity as Rosalie settled into life at the Wilder Ranch. She and Ethan had agreed on terms for her employment: a modest salary, room and board, and Sundays free, and she had written a carefully worded letter to her parents informing them of her aunt's death and her new position. She didn't expect a reply. Emma proved to be a bright and eager pupil, though her education had been spotty at best. She read at a basic level but struggled with arithmetic and had never been exposed to proper grammar or history. Her enthusiasm, however, made up for any deficiencies. "Miss Taylor, look," Emma exclaimed one morning as they sat in the study, now outfitted as a schoolroom with a small blackboard, desk, and bookshelf. She had just successfully completed a series of addition problems. "I did them all right." "Excellent work, Emma," Rosalie praised. "You're making wonderful progress." The girl beamed with pride. "Uncle Ethan says I'm smart as a whip, just like my pa was." "Your uncle is absolutely correct," Rosalie smiled. "Now shall we move on to your reading lesson?" As Emma worked through a passage from a simple reader, Rosalie found her gaze wandering to the window, where she could see Ethan in the distance, working with the ranch hands to repair a section of fence. Even from here, she could appreciate the easy strength with which he moved, the natural authority he commanded among his men. "Miss Taylor," Emma's voice broke into her thoughts. "You're not listening." Rosalie flushed, embarrassed to be caught daydreaming. "I'm sorry, Emma. Please continue." Later that afternoon, as Emma ran outside to play before supper, Rosalie found herself alone in the kitchen with Clara, who was showing her how to make proper biscuits. "You're good with that child," Clara observed, watching as Rosalie carefully cut the dough into rounds. "She's taken to you something fierce." "She's a joy to teach," Rosalie replied honestly. "So eager to learn," Clara nodded approvingly. "This house needed a woman's touch. Don't get me wrong, Ethan does his best by that girl, but a child needs more than just a hard-working uncle." "He seems very devoted to her," Rosalie observed, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Devoted don't begin to cover it." Clara checked the oven temperature before continuing. "When his brother and sister-in-law died, Ethan didn't hesitate. Rode 3 days straight to fetch Emma from her grandparents' place in Kansas. They weren't fit to raise her, too old, too set in their ways. Ethan brought her here, built on 2 more rooms to the house, and has been trying to be both mother and father to her ever since." Rosalie felt a warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the hot oven. "That's remarkable. That's Ethan Wilder," Clara said simply. "Heart as big as the Colorado sky, that man. Just needs someone to share it with." Before Rosalie could respond to this rather pointed observation, the back door swung open and Ethan himself walked in, bringing with him the scent of fresh air and sunshine. "Something smells good in here," he commented, washing his hands at the sink. "Miss Taylor's learning to make my biscuits," Clara informed him. "Got a natural touch for it, too." Ethan looked surprised. "You don't need to be cooking, Miss Taylor. That's not part of your duties." "I asked Clara to teach me," Rosalie explained. "I'm embarrassed to admit I've never done much in a kitchen before." He studied her for a moment, something unreadable in his blue eyes. "Well, I reckon there's a first time for everything. Learning goes both ways out here." At supper that evening, Emma chattered excitedly about her lessons, clearly trying to impress her uncle with her new knowledge. "And Miss Taylor says tomorrow we're going to learn about the presidents." "Is that so?" Ethan smiled at his niece's enthusiasm. "Which one are you most interested in learning about?" Emma considered this seriously. "Lincoln, I guess, because of the war." Ethan nodded. "Good choice. Man of principle Lincoln was. What about you, Uncle Ethan? Did you fight in the war?" Emma asked. A shadow crossed Ethan's face. "I did, Emma, but that's a story for when you're older." Rosalie looked at him with newfound interest. He would have been quite young during the Civil War, perhaps only 16 or 17 when it ended in 1865. The thought of him as a boy soldier made her heart ache. After Emma had been tucked into bed, Rosalie found herself alone with Ethan in the sitting room. He was looking over some ledgers, a pair of wire-rimmed spectacles perched on his nose that somehow made him look both more scholarly and more ruggedly attractive. "Emma is making excellent progress," she offered, breaking the comfortable silence. "She has a quick mind." Ethan looked up, a smile warming his features. "I'm glad to hear it. I was worried she'd fight you on the lessons, but she seems to be enjoying them." "Children often respond to structure and positive attention," Rosalie said. "Emma just needed someone to focus on her education." He set down his pencil, removing the spectacles to rub the bridge of his nose. "I appreciate what you're doing for her, Miss Taylor. I'm not much good at book learning myself. Never had the patience for it. Yet you run this entire ranch, manage the accounts, and oversee a dozen men," Rosalie observed. "That requires considerable intelligence and skill, Mr. Wilder." "Ethan," he reminded her gently. "And thank you for saying so. Different kinds of learning, I suppose." He hesitated, then added, "I hope you're finding your accommodations comfortable. Is there anything you need?" The genuine concern in his voice touched her. "Everything is perfect, thank you. I'm happier here than I expected to be." Their eyes met across the room and something electric passed between them. Rosalie looked away first, her cheeks warming. "I should bid you good night," she said, rising from her chair. "Tomorrow will be another full day of lessons." "Good night, Miss Taylor." His voice was soft, almost tender. "Rosalie," she corrected with a small smile. "If I'm to call you Ethan, it's only fair." He nodded, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Good night, Rosalie." That night, as she lay in her comfortable bed, Rosalie found herself thinking of Ethan Wilder, his quiet strength, his devotion to his niece, the way his eyes seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed defenses. It was dangerous territory, she knew. She was here as Emma's governess, nothing more. And yet, the weeks passed, and summer gave way to autumn. Emma continued to thrive under Rosalie's tutelage, and Rosalie herself began to blossom in the freedom of her new life. She learned to ride a gentle mare Ethan had selected for her, to bake bread that rivaled even Clara's, and to appreciate the wild beauty of the Colorado landscape. One crisp October afternoon, Ethan found her sitting by the creek, sketching in a small notebook she had purchased from the general store. "You have talent," he observed, looking over her shoulder at the drawing of the cottonwood trees reflected in the water. Rosalie jumped slightly, not having heard his approach. "Oh, thank you, it's just a hobby." "May I?" He gestured to the space beside her on the flat rock where she sat. "Of course." He settled next to her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. They sat in companionable silence for a few moments, watching the water flow past. "Emma tells me you're teaching her to dance," he said eventually. Rosalie smiled. "Basic waltzing. Every young lady should know how to dance. She's very excited about it. Says she wants to show me what she's learned. She's a quick study, you should be proud." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I am, more than I can say." He turned to look directly at her. "You've brought something special to this place, Rosalie, to Emma, to all of us." His words made her heart flutter. "I've done nothing extraordinary. You don't see it, do you?" His voice was gentle. "How you've transformed this house into a home again. How Emma looks forward to each day now instead of just getting through it. How even the hands notice the difference." Rosalie felt tears threatening and blinked them away. "I'm just doing my job." "No." Ethan reached out, his calloused fingers lightly touching her cheek. "You're doing much more than that. You're healing us, I think." The touch of his hand sent a current through her body. "Ethan." Before she could continue, the sound of hoofbeats interrupted them. One of the ranch hands, Sam, came galloping up to them. "Mr. Wilder got trouble at the north pasture. Rustlers hit while Jenkins was bringing the herd in. They made off with at least 20 head." Ethan was on his feet immediately, all traces of tenderness gone from his expression, replaced by grim determination. "Anyone hurt?" Jenkins took a bullet to the shoulder. "Doc's with him now at the bunkhouse." "Gather the men, we ride in 10 minutes. He turned to Rosalie. "I'm sorry. I have to go." "Of course," she said, suddenly afraid. "Please be careful." The concern in her voice seemed to reach him. His expression softened momentarily. "I will. Tell Emma I'll be back as soon as I can." She watched him stride away, her heart pounding with fear and something else, something she wasn't yet ready to name. The next 24 hours were the longest of Rosalie's life. She kept Emma distracted with extra lessons and stories, but her own thoughts were constantly with Ethan and his men, out there somewhere in the gathering darkness, pursuing dangerous thieves. It was nearly midnight the following night when she heard the horses returning. Unable to contain herself, she threw a shawl over her nightdress and hurried downstairs. The men were dismounting in the yard, their expressions weary but triumphant. And there was Ethan, alive and apparently unharmed. Relief flooded through her with such force that her knees nearly buckled. She stood in the doorway, watching as he gave instructions to the hands, his voice steady and assured. When he turned and saw her, something in his face changed, softened. He handed the reins of his horse to one of the men and walked toward her, his spurs jingling softly in the night silence. "You should be asleep," he said, but there was no reproach in his tone. "I couldn't rest until I knew you were safe," she admitted. "Did you find them? The rustlers?" He nodded, stepping into the light from the doorway. Only then did she see the dried blood on his shirt. "You're hurt." Her hand flew to her mouth. "It's nothing, just a graze." He tried to brush it off, but she was already pulling him inside. "Sit down. Let me look at it." To her surprise, he complied, sinking into a kitchen chair while she hurried to fetch water and clean cloths. When she returned, he had removed his shirt, revealing a shallow bullet wound across his upper arm and a torso mapped with old scars that told stories of a hard life lived to its fullest. Rosalie tried to focus on the wound, not on the play of muscles beneath tanned skin or the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. "This needs cleaning," she said, her voice remarkably steady. "It might sting." "I've had worse," he replied simply. As she gently cleaned the wound, their closeness became almost unbearable. She could smell the masculine scent of him, leather and sweat, and something uniquely Ethan, and feel the heat radiating from his skin. "The rustlers?" she asked, desperate for conversation to distract her from their proximity. "We caught them, recovered most of the cattle. They'll stand trial in Denver." His voice was low, intimate in the quiet kitchen. "One of them won't be standing trial anywhere. He chose to fight rather than surrender." The matter-of-fact way he said it reminded her that this man, for all his gentleness with Emma and his courtesy to her, was forged in a harsh land where survival often came down to split-second decisions. "I'm sorry you had to do that," she said softly. He caught her wrist as she was applying a bandage, his fingers warm against her pulse. "Are you sorry that I protect what's mine?" The intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "No, I'm sorry you had to make that choice, that anyone did." He released her wrist but continued to hold her gaze. "You're a remarkable woman, Rosalie Taylor." Before she could respond, a small voice came from the doorway. "Uncle Ethan, you're back." Emma stood there in her nightgown, her hair tousled from sleep. Ethan quickly pulled his shirt back on, wincing slightly. "Hey there, little one, did we wake you?" Emma rushed to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "I was worried about you." He hugged her tightly. "No need for that. Everything's fine now." Over Emma's head, his eyes met Rosalie's, and the look in them made her heart skip a beat. There was tenderness there, certainly, but also something deeper, something that both thrilled and terrified her. "Back to bed with you," Ethan told his niece gently. "Miss Taylor and I need to finish up here, and then I need some sleep myself." After Emma had gone back upstairs, an awkward silence fell between them. "Thank you for tending to this," Ethan finally said, gesturing to his bandaged arm. "Of course." Rosalie busied herself cleaning up the medical supplies, suddenly shy. "I should get some rest as well." "I'm glad you're home safe." She was nearly to the stairs when his voice stopped her. "Rosalie." It was just her name, nothing more, but something in the way he said it made her turn. "Yes." He stood in the doorway of the kitchen, his tall frame silhouetted against the lamplight. "Sweet dreams." Two simple words, yet they followed her into sleep and colored her dreams with possibilities she had never dared to consider. The next few weeks brought a shift in their relationship. Nothing overt, nothing that could be pointed to as improper, but there was a new awareness between them. Charged glances across the dinner table, lingering touches when passing dishes or books, conversations that stretched late into the evening after Emma had gone to bed. Rosalie knew she was walking a dangerous line. She was an employee in his household, responsible for his niece's education. Any deeper involvement would compromise her position and possibly her reputation, further what little remained of it. And yet, she found herself increasingly drawn to him, to his quiet strength and unexpected tenderness, to the way he listened when she spoke as if her thoughts truly mattered. Winter arrived with a vengeance in late November, blanketing the ranch in snow and keeping them largely confined to the house. Emma delighted in the enforced togetherness, thriving on the cozy evenings spent reading by the fire or playing the simple card games Rosalie had taught her. It was during one such evening, with Emma already in bed, and Clara retired to her quarters in the east wing of the house, that Ethan finally broached the subject Rosalie had been both anticipating and dreading. "You've never spoken of why you came west," he said quietly, pouring her a small glass of sherry. "I haven't asked because it seemed a painful subject." Rosalie accepted the glass, warming the crystal between her palms. "It is difficult to discuss. You don't have to tell me." She looked up at him, seeing only sincere interest and concern in his expression. "I think perhaps I do. You've opened your home to me, trusted me with Emma's education. You deserve to know what kind of woman you've welcomed into your household." Taking a deep breath, she began to tell him about Boston, about Frederick Ashton, her father's business partner, a man nearly 20 years her senior who had pursued her with flattering attention and gifts. How young and naive she had been, believing his promises of marriage despite his existing wife, whom he claimed was sickly, and would soon release him from his vows. How he had arranged to meet her alone in her father's study during a dinner party, ostensibly to give her a special gift, only to attempt liberties no gentleman would take, and how her father and several guests had walked in just as she was struggling to free herself from Ashton's unwelcome embrace. "He claimed I had enticed him, that I had been pursuing him for months," she finished, her voice barely above a whisper. "And everyone believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was a respected businessman, a family friend, a pillar of society. I was just a foolish girl who should have known better." Throughout her story, Ethan had remained silent, but she could see the tightening of his jaw, the darkening of his eyes. Now he set down his own glass with a controlled precision that belied the anger she sensed beneath the surface. "Your family sent you away rather than stand by you." His voice was dangerously quiet. Rosalie nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "My father said I had brought shame on the family name, that my younger sister's prospects would be ruined by association. My mother, she agreed with him, said no decent man would have me now." "Your parents are fools," Ethan said flatly. "And that man, Ashton, deserves a thrashing at the very least." His vehemence surprised her. "You believe me, just like that? Why wouldn't I?" He looked genuinely confused. "Because no one else did," she whispered, tears threatening despite her best efforts to contain them. "Not even my own mother." Ethan moved to sit beside her on the settee, taking her hands in his. "Rosalie, look at me." When she did, the intensity in his eyes nearly took her breath away. "I've known you for months now. I've seen your character, your kindness, your integrity. The story you've told me doesn't surprise me at all, not because I think you capable of such deception, but because I know how men like Ashton operate. They see something beautiful and pure and want to possess it, to tarnish it." A tear escaped, trailing down her cheek. Ethan reached up to brush it away, his touch achingly gentle. "You have nothing to be ashamed of," he continued. "Nothing, and your family. Well, family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about who stands by you when everyone else walks away." "What are you saying?" she asked, hardly daring to hope she understood his meaning. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, coming to rest just beneath her chin. "I'm saying that family is where you find peace, Rosalie. And I hope you found some measure of peace here with us." The tenderness in his voice undid her completely. The tears she had held back for so long came in a flood, and Ethan simply pulled her into his arms, holding her while she wept for all she had lost. for the rejection that still cut so deeply. When her tears finally subsided, she became aware of his heartbeat beneath her cheek, strong and steady, of his hand gently stroking her hair, of the safe harbor his arms had created. "I'm sorry," she murmured, embarrassed by her breakdown. "I've ruined your shirt." He chuckled softly, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I reckon it'll survive." He tilted her face up to his expression serious once more. "Rosalie, I need to tell you something, and I want you to hear me clearly. You are not ruined. You are not damaged. And any man worth his salt would count himself blessed to call you his." The conviction in his voice made her breath catch. "Ethan, let me finish," he said gently. "I didn't bring you here just to teach Emma. Well, I did. She needed a teacher and you were qualified, but keeping you here, that was for more selfish reasons. I've come to care for you, Rosalie, deeply. More than is proper for an employer to care for a governess." Her heart began to race. I've come to care for you as well," she admitted, scarcely believing her own boldness. His eyes darkened. "Then I'd like your permission to court you properly. Not as your employer, but as a man who admires everything about you and wants the chance to win your heart." Joy bubbled up within her, bright and unexpected. "You already have it," she whispered. For a moment, he simply looked at her as if memorizing her features. Then, slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, he lowered his lips to hers in a kiss so tender it brought fresh tears to her eyes. Unlike Frederick Ashton's forceful, demanding embrace, Ethan's kiss asked rather than took, cherished rather than possessed. When they finally parted, she felt as if something fundamental had shifted within her, as if a wound long festering had finally begun to heal. "I should go," she said reluctantly, aware that despite their feelings, propriety must still be observed. "It's late," he nodded, helping her to her feet but keeping hold of her hand. "I'll speak to Reverend Miller tomorrow about finding a replacement for you as Emma's governess." Alarm shot through her. "A replacement? But why? Have I done something wrong?" Ethan's smile was warm with amusement and tenderness. "No, darling, but I can't very well court you properly while you're in my employ, now can I? It wouldn't be right." Understanding dawned, along with a flutter of apprehension. "But where will I go? What will I do? Mrs. Miller has been looking for help with the church school. It would be perfect. You'd still be teaching, but living in town, respectable and proper. And I would call on you like any suitor should, bringing flowers and taking you for buggy rides on Sunday afternoons." His eyes twinkled. "Emma will be heartbroken to lose you as her full-time teacher, of course, but I think the promise of you becoming her aunt someday might console her." Rosalie's heart soared at the implication of his words. "You're very sure of yourself, Mr. Wilder," she teased, her cheeks warm with pleasure. "Not at all," he replied seriously. "I'm only sure of how I feel. The rest, well, that's up to you." The next morning, a special delivery arrived from Denver, a telegram from Rosalie's mother. Clara brought it to her at breakfast, her expression concerned. "Bad news from home?" Ethan asked, watching as Rosalie's face paled while reading the brief message. "My sister has fallen ill with pneumonia," she said, her voice tight with worry. They're asking me to come home. My mother says they were wrong to send me away, that they miss me and want to make amends." Ethan's face remained carefully neutral. "Do you want to go?" It was the most important question anyone had ever asked her. Did she want to return to Boston, to the family that had cast her aside when she needed them most, to a society that would whisper behind fans about her scandal? Or did she want to stay here in this place where she had found acceptance, purpose, and love? "No," she said finally, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I'll send a telegram expressing my concern for Margaret and wishing her a swift recovery, but my place is here now." The relief on Ethan's face was palpable. "Are you sure? They're your family. Rosalie thought of his words from the night before. Family is where you find peace. I'm sure. My family is here now. The transition from governess to schoolteacher happened more quickly than Rosalie had anticipated. Reverend Miller and his wife were delighted to have someone of Rosalie's education take over the small church school, and within a week, she had moved into a tidy room in their home in town. The separation from Emma was difficult. The child had cried when Rosalie explained she would be living in town, but the promise of regular visits and Ethan's careful explanation that this change was necessary because Miss Taylor might become part of our family someday, eventually won her over. True to his word, Ethan began courting Rosalie with all the attention and respect she had never received from Frederick Ashton. He called on her at the Miller's home, bringing wildflowers and books he thought she might enjoy. They took walks through town, rode together on Sunday afternoons, and attended church services side by side, Emma between them like a bridge connecting their worlds. The townspeople of Delta watched their courtship with interest and, for the most part, approval. A few raised eyebrows at first. An Eastern lady of refinement paired with the rough-hewn rancher, but as weeks passed into months, even the most skeptical had to admit they seemed well matched. Winter gave way to spring, and with the new season came new beginnings. On a perfect April morning, with the mountains still snow-capped but wildflowers beginning to dot the valley, Ethan took Rosalie riding to a special spot overlooking the ranch. "I brought you here for a reason," he said as they dismounted, helping her down from her mare. "This is where my father stood when he first claimed this land. He told me once that he knew in that moment that this was where he was meant to build a life, a legacy." Rosalie looked out over the sprawling ranch, the neat buildings, the grazing cattle, the creek winding through it all like a silver ribbon. "He built something beautiful. He did." Ethan took her hands in his. "And now I want to build on that foundation, but I need a partner to do it right." Her heart began to race as he dropped to one knee before her, reaching into his pocket to withdraw a small velvet box. "Rosalie Taylor, you came into my life when I wasn't looking for love, but now I can't imagine my life without you in it. You've brought light and laughter back to our home, given Emma the mothering she desperately needed, and shown me what it means to truly love someone with your whole heart." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfect diamond. "Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, Emma's mother, and the heart of our home?" Tears of joy blurred her vision as she nodded. "Yes, Ethan. Yes, with all my heart." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to gather her in his arms, sealing their engagement with a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and devotion. Their wedding took place in June, with the valley in full bloom. Emma served as Rosalie's maid of honor, solemn with the responsibility and radiant with joy. Clara wept openly as Rosalie walked down the aisle of the small Delta church, wearing a gown of ivory silk ordered specially from Denver. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Miller declared before a congregation made up of the entire town. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." As Ethan kissed his bride, cheers erupted from the assembled guests, none louder than Emma's exuberant whoop that made everyone laugh. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up under the cottonwood trees and lanterns strung from the branches. There was dancing and feasting that lasted well into the night, but the moment Rosalie would always remember came just as the sun was setting. Ethan found her sitting alone for a moment, catching her breath after a lively Virginia reel. He sat beside her, taking her hand, the one now adorned with both an engagement ring and a simple gold band. "Happy, Mrs. Wilder?" he asked, his voice tender. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied honestly. I never imagined when I stepped off that stagecoach in Delta that I would find this a home, a family, a love like this. He brushed a curl from her forehead, his touch reverent. You know what I believe? I believe some things are meant to be even when they start out looking like misfortune. Your family sending you away, your aunt passing before you arrived, those seemed like tragedies at the time. And now they seem like steps on a path that was always leading me here, she finished for him. To you, to Emma, to this life we're building. To family, he said softly. The real kind, the kind where you find peace. As summer turned to fall and fall to winter, Rosalie settled into her role as Ethan's wife and Emma's stepmother with a joy that sometimes threatened to overwhelm her. The scandal in Boston seemed like a distant dream, something that had happened to another person entirely. Her parents had written after receiving news of her marriage, their letter stiff with disapproval that she had tied herself to a Western rancher, rather than returning east to rehabilitate her reputation. She had written back politely but firmly, explaining that she had found happiness and had no intention of leaving her new family. Christmas that year was especially meaningful, their first as a true family. Emma, now 10, and thriving under the combined influence of Rosalie's genteel guidance and Ethan's practical wisdom, had insisted on decorating the entire house with evergreen boughs and red ribbons. It has to be perfect, she declared, directing Clara and Rosalie in their efforts with the seriousness of a general commanding troops. It's our first Christmas together, and I want it to be the best ever. On Christmas Eve, after a magnificent dinner prepared by Clara with Rosalie's assistance, they gathered in the sitting room to exchange gifts. Emma received a beautiful new dress, books, and a silver locket containing miniature portraits of her parents that Ethan had commissioned from a photographer in Denver. So you always have them with you, he explained as she threw her arms around him in gratitude. Ethan gave Rosalie a stunning emerald pendant to match your eyes, he said, and she presented him with a fine new saddle she had secretly ordered months ago. But it was Rosalie's gift to Emma that brought tears to everyone's eyes. She had spent months working on a quilt, each square representing something important in the girl's life: her parents' home in Kansas, her favorite horse, the creek where she loved to play, the schoolroom where she learned her letters, and in the center, a square depicting their house with 3 figures standing before it. A tall man, a woman, and a child holding hands. It's us, Emma whispered, running her fingers over the intricate stitching. Our family. Yes, Rosalie confirmed, her voice thick with emotion. Our family. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed, still clutching her new locket, Ethan and Rosalie sat before the fire, enjoying a moment of peaceful solitude. I have one more gift for you, Rosalie said softly, taking Ethan's hand and placing it on her abdomen. One that won't arrive until summer. For a moment he stared at her uncomprehendingly. Then understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by a joy so pure it took her breath away. A baby, he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. We're having a baby, she nodded, her own eyes shining with happy tears. Doctor. Marshall confirmed it yesterday. I wanted to tell you today when it could be just between us. Ethan gathered her into his arms, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. I love you, Rosalie Wilder. I love you more than I have words to express. And I love you, she replied, her heart full to bursting. For giving me a home when I had none. For believing in me when no one else did. For showing me that family isn't about blood or duty or social standing, it's about love, acceptance, and finding peace in each other's hearts. Their son, Daniel James Wilder, was born on a bright July morning in 1877. with Emma hovering anxiously outside the bedroom door until Clara finally allowed her in to meet her new brother. The sight of the child's tiny hand gripping Ethan's finger brought tears to Rosalie's eyes, this perfect blending of them both, with Ethan's dark hair and her green eyes, a new life born of their love. In the years that followed, the Wilder ranch prospered and grew. 2 more children joined their family, another son, Thomas, in 1879, and finally a daughter, Grace, in 1882. Emma blossomed into a beautiful young woman who eventually went east for education, not to Boston, but to a progressive women's college in New York, returning to Colorado with a teaching degree and a determination to establish a proper school in Delta. Rosalie never did return to Boston, though she maintained a cordial correspondence with her sister Margaret. Her parents remained distant, never quite accepting her choice to build a life so far from the society they valued. But as Ethan had said on that fateful night when she first confessed her past to him, family isn't always about blood, it's about who stands by you when everyone else walks away. And in Ethan Wilder, in their children, in the life they built together on that Colorado ranch, Rosalie found everything she had never known she needed: purpose, respect, love without conditions, and above all, the peace that comes from knowing you are exactly where you are meant to be. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised her with a special gift, a small framed sampler, clearly his own unpracticed needlework, bearing the words he had said to her all those years ago. "Family is where you find peace." "To remind you," he said, his voice still capable of making her heart race after all these years, "that no matter what brought you to me, scandal, sorrow, or simple chance, it was the best thing that ever happened to both of us." The scandal that had once seemed like the end of her life had, in fact, been just the beginning. And in this place, with this man and these children, she had found not just a family, but her true self, strong, capable, loved, and at peace. "Thank you," she whispered, leaning her head against Ethan's shoulder as his arm came around her waist, familiar and comforting. "For everything." He pressed a kiss to her temple, his touch as tender now as it had been when they were young. "No, Rosalie, thank you for coming west, for staying, for making this house a home and these children a family, for loving me enough to build this life with me." As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the valley in gold and purple, Rosalie Wilder gazed out at the legacy they had created together, not just the prosperous ranch or the fine house or even their beautiful children, but something less tangible and far more precious. A love that had healed old wounds, bridged different worlds, and created a family bound not by obligation or society's rules, but by choice, commitment, and unconditional acceptance. In the end, she reflected, that was what truly mattered. Not where you came from or what mistakes you'd made, but where you found peace and who you found it with.